No, perfect. We have started recording. So thank you for joining us this morning, and we appreciate you taking the time. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our host, Cindy. She can introduce herself, and we'll continue on with this morning's webinar.
Hello, everybody. I am Cindy Anderson. I am with the Bureau of Apprenticeship in the Department of Workforce Development. My specific role is to do outreach and program development of apprenticeship programs, primarily in the wages grant field, but also working in some of the other grants. What I'm going to do today is go through a brief Apprenticeship 101 and then talk about some of the federal initiatives and the expansion of apprenticeship. Jump in and ask questions if you need to. We can be real casual, or you can wait to the end and write things down. It is up to you. And I will try not to use acronyms and things like that. So, get my buttons here going. All right, apprenticeship. Okay, I am in slideshow mode and you are not moving. Bear with me a moment. I had checked this, but now it doesn't seem to be moving. When I'm in share mode, interesting.
Let's go. And then, are you sharing your PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay.
That seems to be when I stopped progressing. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
There we go.
We're back.
Sorry about that. You know, a user issue. Okay. Briefly, apprenticeship has been around in Wisconsin since 1911, and the feds picked up our model and used that as a basis for theirs in 1940. So it has been around for a very long time. Apprenticeship is, in its boiled down version, it's an employment training program for employees. It's an earn while you learn method of training employees. Can be used as an attraction tool, and it's definitely a retention tool. But the screen in front of us is talking about the population and the shift. And this is important because if you look at the age of the 18-year-old in the population going down and the age of the 65-year-olds, and then you look at where this red bullseye is, we've already surpassed the point where we are exceeding the number of young people who could come into the workforce. Compounding this issue is as those folks who are older leave the workforce, they're taking their knowledge with them. Apprenticeship relies on knowledge workers to convey knowledge, and so we like to say that the best time for apprenticeship to get into apprenticeship was 4 years ago. The second best time is right now, because you can gain all that knowledge from those workers prior to them leaving the workforce in very large numbers. So we're going to go over what is apprenticeship, how does it work, what are the outcomes, who are the stakeholders. So like I said, the law is the nation's model. The goal is to provide industry with skilled labor. It provides career opportunities for youth. And then the law also protects employers and apprentices who enter into apprenticeship. The law in 1911 that was passed created the vocational schools to provide the theoretical instruction. That's kind of a little known fact from way back then. So traditionally in apprenticeship, the technical colleges are the provider of what we call related instruction, but they are not always the provider. Some employers choose to do their own, and some of the union construction areas, they do all of their own as well. The apprenticeship credential is a nationally recognized credential. So the structure of apprenticeship is it's an employer-sponsored flexible training program. We provide documents to the employer and the apprentice that lays out exactly what they're going to be trained in, what the competencies are that they're expected to meet. Curriculum is loaded and available to be seen, so that's not a mystery either. And One of the unique things about apprenticeship is apprentices can start below the going rate. So say I flip burgers at McDonald's and I make $10 an hour, but now I want to be an apprenticeship of burger flipping. I might start at $8 an hour until I learn how to do that, and I may get raises at certain increments as I go along. So apprenticeship legally allows that ability for employers to do that. So as the apprentice meets competencies that are outlined in the program, they get specified wage increases that are also outlined for the employer. It relies on a journey worker, or we're also trying to get into the usage of the word knowledge worker, because our new industries don't have card-carrying journey workers. But the mentor or knowledge worker does provide the on-the-job training, and the folks at the schools or other training centers provide the theoretical instruction that supports the on-the-job learning, and the apprentice graduates. These are industry-driven and industry-designed by employer groups who are gotten together, and we take them through a really concrete process. It's called the DACOM process. It's a very well-respected process nationally and also used by some international folks. Some of the beauty of apprenticeship is your time to gain expertise. So when you are an apprentice, you start on the job right away, and you start learning the job right away, and you go to school right away. So you see the arc of that learning curve is pretty high. In a traditional program, you might go to school for 2 years or 4 years, and so you're not learning the on-the-job piece, and then you have to get that later when you get on the job. And as you can see by the arrows, your end point is the same, but what the employer gains is somebody who's reaching productivity at a lot of earlier points in the process. Not to say they're all that productive at the very first day, but none of us are on our first day on the job. So it's a supervised, structured on-the-job training program provided by the sponsor or employer. In order to be a registered apprentice, you have to have a job. You have to be hired, an employee. 90% of the training is on the job, and we have written standards, like I've mentioned, that govern what is taught and learned on the job, and then the work must be supervised. An employer doesn't have to have only one supervisor or journey worker for an apprentice. If there's multiple skill sets being learned in apprenticeship, you can pass that on. So it's not like they have to have just one person permanently assigned. They could pass that responsibility to several workers who may have different skill sets to share, but there always has to be that person who has knowledge. And then for the related to classroom instruction portion, that portion is required by law to be provided, primarily through the colleges. One of the unique things in Wisconsin is that the employer pays the employee their normal wage while attending school. So in Wisconsin, apprentices go to school in a variety of ways, but it's usually in a cohort model. They usually go to school 1 day a week or 1 half day every other week. Some of the programs use block scheduling where, like the heavy operators, they will tend to go to Coloma to their big training facility like for a week at a time during the off season when they can't do a lot of construction and whatnot. So it's very specific to apprentices, and the schools run their classes this way so that the apprentice isn't in and out of school. Like they don't do a Tuesday, Thursday, 1 to 2 o'clock schedule and then they're all over. This way employers can block out the time. They know on Friday, for example, all their apprentices are gone to school, and that helps them manage their workload. And then apprentices pay for tuition and books unless the employer offers to pay for that, which oftentimes they do. And there's also a program in Wisconsin, we call it ACAP, because we like acronyms, and you can get, I believe it's up to $1,000 of your tuition and books reimbursed through that program. Because apprentices don't get degrees For the most part in Wisconsin, the tuition in books is not as steep as you might think. They may only be completing somewhere between 4 credits. Higher programs are going to be maybe 12. So it's not like they're getting technical diplomas or associate degrees, which would be like 72 credits. So it's not a huge lift. And then the key is they're receiving a wage while they're in school, so the ability to pay for tuition and books is a lot easier when you're being paid. So we have on this slide the average length of apprenticeship being 4 years. Right now, the shortest apprenticeship that can exist is 1 year, and the longest one we have in Wisconsin is 6 years, and then they fall through the gamut. Many of the new ones that we'll be creating probably are going to fall in the 2-year range, but it does run the gamut of the ranges. The higher the skilled position, the more years of apprenticeship. We do have the ability in certain industries to build in interim credentials, and also for those occupations requiring professional occupational licenses to the Department of Safety and Professional Services, like electricians and plumbers, those functions are built into their training as well. And then folks get a completion credential. Apprenticeship also provides formal and informal pathways for college credits in folks who are doing their related instruction through the technical colleges are obviously earning credits that have transferability. And for programs that are 3 years in length or longer, you are eligible to receive 39 credits towards your associate's degree. The technical colleges do surveys, and they find that 34% of apprentices who return the surveys indicate that they do plan on going on and continuing their education. So that's a nice thing for them to have. So the sponsor, employer, agrees to hire the worker and allow time for the mentor to work with the apprentice, and sometimes they pay for tuition and books. The employer agrees to follow the state and federal apprenticeship regulations and any and all EEOC and normal employment rules and regulations, and sign a 3-way contract with themselves, the apprentice, and the Bureau. So the benefits to the employer is it's a targeted training, and they're getting productive work in the facility, on their equipment, with any legacy systems an employer may have, but it specifically meets the needs of the employer. It can be used as an internal career ladder for unskilled employees. Many employers will use incumbent workers to skill up via the apprenticeship method. The wage is equivalent to the skill level, so that refers back to what I was talking about, that an apprentice can start below the going rate and then work their way up to that. Some employers don't invoke that rule because they can't attract folks without paying right away and then training them. So in super competitive industries, apprentices may not dip very much below, if at all, the going wage. And it's proven to reduce turnover and absenteeism. Apprenticeship right now has an 84% retention rate, and a lot of the folks think that is definitely due to the commitment that the employer makes toward that employee and the mentoring relationship. So if you're a new hire, what better way to come on by having a permanently assigned mentor to walk you through the culture of the place and some of those, unwritten rules, and you just get to know people more because you're really being walked through the employer's system. This is also a benefit to the employers because it is a structured method to capture the expertise of their current workforce, especially now prior to leaving for retirement. It's a structured method to upgrade or standardize the skills of your existing workforce. You can use some of the criteria if you've ever seen a contract or the curriculum layout. You can look at that to look at some areas that other folks may just need to learn, and can do that in a variety of ways. And it brings new techniques and ideas into the company because your students the apprentice goes to school in a cohort model with other apprentices. The schools may be using different equipment and may have expertise in certain areas that the apprentice company does not. And then you may be learning things from other apprentices, and you take that back and share that. Our programs used to be more time-based, like it was always a set number of years. We're tending to go more to competency-based and hybrid. In fact, all of the new programs lately are hybrid. We don't have any employer group yet who is wanting to go strictly competency-based, but we'll see if that changes down the road. So right now we use a number of years combined with checking off competencies, and you have to accomplish both in order to graduate. And the other portion of this is the youth apprenticeship side of the pathway. So there is a program in Wisconsin that's been going for about 22 or so years where students in high school, juniors and seniors, can be a youth apprentice. And they are using it as a career exploration tool. They get credits at the colleges if the program is set up that way, or they get just high school credits. They also work and do their apprenticeship in an employer, and then they can be paid for. This is working hard to create more of a seamless transition from YA to RA. Because in the past, like I said, the youth were being more exposed to career clusters, and registered apprenticeship is very specific occupationally. But what we have done is we have worked with our registered apprenticeship state committees to do the crosswalking of how many credits would transfer over for students in certain of the youth apprenticeship programs. And the other thing we're doing is working hard to make sure that the curriculums for, say for example, our IT youth apprenticeship are updated to reflect, number one, just the changing times in the IT field, but also the fact that we're going to be rolling out apprenticeships in the IT arena. And we want those youth apprentices to be prepared to just walk right into registered apprenticeship. So that's like a little 101 about apprenticeship. I'm going to go back to my other slides and talk about some of the federal initiatives. But first, does anybody have any questions? All right. Let me just get back here. Okay. Back in 2014, at a State of the Union address, President Obama said, why in America do we keep this a secret? And in Wisconsin, it's definitely been a secret. And also, he was pretty surprised that the European countries are still very robustly using this, and it's also expanding into other countries. Germany kind of had the bull by the horns and the biggest input, but now UK has really been expanding in other areas. So they thought, well, maybe it's because we've never actually paid attention to this program, and they decided to put some federal funding into the apprenticeship program for the first time since 1940. They created a series of grants. Wisconsin wrote for all 3 grants and received all 3 grants. And the state of Wisconsin actually has 3 of the wages, or what we call wages grants. Milwaukee Workforce Development Board received a direct grant, and the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design received a direct grant, and then we as the Bureau received a direct grant. The purpose of that grant was to expand apprenticeship into new occupational areas, and for Wisconsin, we chose IT and healthcare, and then we also chose to do a small focus of the grant on expanding our advanced manufacturing apprenticeships. So the advanced manufacturing focused on 3 current apprenticeships: maintenance technician, industrial manufacturing technician, and welder fabricator. And those are pretty heavily represented on the eastern part of the state, so we wanted to make sure that colleges and employers had an opportunity to access those for the rest of the state. So we focused on that. And We're slowly rolling those out. It's getting closer to here. Mid-State is picking up some this year. So it's coming. I think Blackhawk in the South, their region is doing some, I think, a couple programs for fall. And I know North Central has put in for some grants. So it's coming slowly but surely as we get the word out to employers and the colleges that this is available. And the other thing we did was we created one new manufacturing apprenticeship. We called it Mechatronics. It's a combination of our maintenance technician, industrial electrician with a big portion of robotics, advanced LPCs, and things added to it. That program did get completed, and it is ready for a January start for any of the colleges to pick up. I believe that 2 are picking that up for the January term, and then that'll also slowly roll out. One of the beautiful things about apprenticeship is when we create a program, we create it with a statewide focus. 80% of the curriculum should be the same no matter if you're in Ashland or Kenosha, and then there's about 20% flexibility for local regional differences that you may have, like occupational industry differences, or your employer may have legacy systems that they want you to learn compared to what maybe we specified in the curriculum. But anyways, it does allow a lot of flexibility for employers to add their own specifications to the training. We also identified healthcare. We were looking at 3 areas in healthcare. We did develop a community health worker program that is a hospital-based program. And we are continuing in discussions about medical assistant, health support specialist, or patient care associate, and those would be in the long-term care field. And then we're working with a group right now on pharmacy technician, both retail and inpatient, and we'll have an organizing call for that in the next couple weeks. But we haven't actually created anything in this area yet. We're still in discussion. I think pharmacy technician is probably going to launch its DACM in September, though. Information technology, we've actually been going kind of gangbusters in this area. The grant indicated that we should develop 5 new apprenticeships. We had originally had folks sign on and support the grant, and then, by the time you write things and progress, it gets a little longer. And so we had to reassess the occupational titles that we had picked, and we got a list of about 7 different things that employers kind of gravitated to in each of our conversations. So we just started asking them to tick off which ones they wanted and if they were interested in participating in a program development process. We just finished the creation of software developer, like a coder, and we're going through the traditional approval process with that and hoping to be done in September with the approval process for the ability for the colleges and employers to be able to pick this up for the January term. And right now that looks like it's going to run, well, it's definitely going to run at Mid-State Technical College and possibly one of these Southeast colleges is looking at that. And then once again, I think as people get a sense of it and we start marketing it, we'll get those out more. We're not very good in apprenticeship quite yet about marketing, and that, marketing outreach and getting the word out. So it's still a bit of a secret, but we're working hard to get this out and this knowledge out. The other thing that we are working on is data analysis. We just had our first DACM meeting for that last week. We had a group of about 10 employers got together and laid out the duties and the tasks, and we'll continue to work with them and a curriculum team from the colleges to fully develop that program. The next program we'll be starting in September is Help Desk. That seemed to rise to the top of the polls for employers. Like mid-September we'll probably kick that one off. That does leave 2 other IT occupations as yet to be chosen, and we'll be working probably to resurvey folks to see if we're still on the right path with some of the things. But some of the other occupations that came to the surface was network security and those type of things. One of the things with the wages grant, which I've just been talking about, was the partnering with the workforce development boards to actually help get the word out and help us continue to market apprenticeship. So we have more boots on the ground and locally working with employers. So each of the 11 boards hired or brought on or retasked a current position to facilitate that process. And it's really been great working with them. We've been able to work with their sector strategy groups. If they had alliances that were formed, we just walked in and talked to folks. And that's kind of how we've been starting to find employers who are interested in participating. So we do plan on continuing. I see I have very little time yet, so I'm going to briefly talk about our expansion grant, which was also to create new programs and to particularly target underrepresented populations. So that grant is primarily focused in Madison and Milwaukee because they have huge numbers of unemployed folks and who we're hoping to tap into some pre-apprenticeship training and then into registered apprenticeships. But that grant is focusing on creation of apprenticeships in 2 new areas, which is biotech and finance, insurance, and banking. And then the rest of that grant is focused on the construction sectors, but with an emphasis on recruiting underrepresented populations. In an apprenticeship, we do have a very poor record of females and minorities in apprenticeships. So this is a really big, important goal for the Bureau, for all of the grants. So we've had a lot of folks from the feds kind of looking at this and helping expand, and it's given us a lot of seed money for working with the schools and the local boards. Does anybody have any questions now?
This is Connie. No, thank you. That was great information. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome, Connie. And I think all of you had my contact information. I was going to say I'd hand you all my business cards, but you're in the cyber world. But also through this office, you can definitely contact folks and then get a hold of me or others. Right now we're in a little staff transition with our position we call the ATR, the Apprentice Technical Representative. But we do actually have regional apprentice representatives to directly help employers go through this process. So that's also nice. All right, I know I had 30 minutes and we are at 31. Any last opportunities for questions? All right, well, thank you all very much for participating, and we will let you go.